Snow drifted in slow, soundless ribbons across the frozen lake of Everpine, British Columbia. The whole town seemed to sleep beneath a white hushed chimneys exhaling thin curls of smoke, Christmas lights blinking faintly through mist. Inside the largest house on the hill, a single lamp burned gold against the frost. Ethan Cole stood before the tall bay window, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass of red wine he'd forgotten to taste. The reflection in the glass returned a stranger, a man in his 30s with a sharp suit and eyes that never quite settled anywhere. Behind him stretched an immaculate living room, modern, perfect, silent. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort. It presses. Every Christmas Eve was the same, a ritual carved out of habit and grief. He would watch the snow, count the minutes until midnight, and tell himself it was just another night. Outside, laughter echoed faintly from downtown Everpine, where the community center hosted its annual carol night. Families gathered by the frozen rink. Children tugged at mittens, chasing one another through lighted pines. Ethan could almost imagine it, the smell of cinnamon, the clatter of skates, the way joy sounded when it wasn't forced. But here, in the house he'd built from glass and precision, time barely moved. He glanced toward the mantel. A single framed photo stood there, a woman with dark hair and gentle eyes, smiling beside a snow-covered road. 6 years ago to the day, that road had vanished beneath a blizzard. So had she, and the son he never met. He exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that trembles. "Merry Christmas, Maya," he whispered, though the air swallowed it whole. The clock ticked on. At 9 p.m. He reheated the untouched dinner he'd prepared out of habit, roast chicken, vegetables, to plates though he always used one. He set the table anyway, old gestures that no longer had reasons. By 9:30, the snow outside thickened into a quiet storm, soft flakes whirling in the yellow glow of the streetlight. Ethan leaned against the window frame, watching the way they fell, slow, relentless, indifferent. Somewhere deep inside, something small ached to be interrupted. Then came the sound. 3 knocks. He froze. The first was faint, almost imagined. The second sharper, definite. The third soft, but certain, cut through the silence like a pulse returning after too long. Ethan turned toward the foyer. No one ever knocked on his door. Not here. Not on Christmas Eve. He hesitated, heart tripping. The house seemed to listen with him. The heating vents sighed. The clock paused between ticks. Then, through the frosted glass, he saw it. A small, blurred silhouette, then another beside it. Shorter, rounder, moving slightly. A child? For a moment he wondered if this was some charity visit, or perhaps a lost traveler. Yet something inside him, the part that still remembered waiting, moved his feet. Before reason could argue, he walked slowly down the hall, each step over hardwood echoing louder than it should. The closer he came, the clearer the sound of wind became, wrapping itself around the house like a whisper. He reached for the brass handle, cold beneath his palm, and pulled the door open. Winter spilled in. The first thing he saw was color, a woman's red scarf fluttering against the white night, and beside her, a little girl in a puffy pink coat, cheeks bright as apples. Snowflakes clung to their hair, glittering in the porch light. "Hi," the woman began, voice slightly breathless from the cold. "I hope we're not interrupting anything." Ethan blinked. "No, not at all." The girl stepped forward shyly, holding up a small box wrapped in brown paper and twine. "We brought cookies," she announced. "Mom says we should give them to the neighbors before Santa comes." "Lily," the woman murmured with a laugh, then looked back at him. "I'm Clara Morgan. We just moved into the yellow house down the road, the one with the broken fence. This is my daughter, Lily." Ethan nodded slowly, words catching somewhere behind surprise. "Welcome to Everpine," he managed. Clara smiled, a small, genuine curve that reached her eyes. "Thank you. We figured since it's Christmas Eve, we'd deliver these tonight." The girl's mitten slipped a little. The box wobbled dangerously. Ethan instinctively reached out, steadying it. Their gloved fingers brushed for a second. Her mittens were warm. His weren't. "You should come in," he said before he could think. "It's freezing out here." Clara hesitated. "We don't want to intrude." "You're not," he said, stepping aside. "Please." She looked at him, measuring something unspoken, then nodded and guided Lily inside. As he closed the door, A different silence settled over the house. Not empty anymore, expectant. Lily's eyes widened as she looked around. "Wow," she whispered. "It looks like a castle." "It's just a house," Ethan said quietly. "It's really quiet," she added. Clara gave her daughter a soft look of warning, but Ethan only smiled faintly. "You're right," he said. "It usually is." In the kitchen, he set the cookie box on the counter. Clara brushed snow from her coat sleeves while Lily explored the room, peering at the polished counters and the lonely silver Christmas tree in the corner. "I hope you like shortbread," Clara said. "We're still unpacking, so our cookie shapes are a little creative," Lily giggled. "Mine looks like a moose, but Mom says it's a star." Ethan found himself laughing and awkward. Rusty sound he barely recognized as his own. "Then it's probably the best star in Everpine." He turned toward the stove, where a pot of milk simmered faintly. He'd meant to make cocoa earlier, then forgot. "Would you like some hot chocolate?" he asked. Lily gasped. "Yes, please." As he poured the steaming drink into mugs, his hand hovered over the cupboard. He bypassed the clean white porcelain and reached for two older cups tucked behind. A pair of chipped ceramics painted with blue pine trees. He wiped off the dust before filling them. When he handed one to Clara, she noticed. "They're beautiful," she said softly. "They were my wife's favorite." He answered before realizing how naked that sounded. Her eyes flickered with gentle understanding. "The kind people learn from their own loss." "Then thank you for sharing them." They sat together at the table, three strangers brought together by accident and snow. The cocoa steamed between them, sweet and fragrant. Lily swung her legs under the chair, humming a carol off-key for a moment. Ethan allowed himself to simply watch, the flicker of candlelight on Clara's hair, the sound of the storm outside softened by laughter, the faint scent of vanilla from the cookies. Something inside him, long locked away, shifted. When Lily finished her drink, she slipped off the chair and wandered toward the tree. After a moment of silent inspection, she untied the pink ribbon from her hair and looped it carefully over one of the higher branches. "There," she said, stepping back. "Now it has someone to play with." Ethan stood motionless, staring at the small bough trembling in the lamplight. For 6 years that tree had stood untouched, perfect but lifeless. And now, because of a 5-year-old stranger, it looked alive. He didn't know what to say. He only knew that, for the first time in a very long while, the house did not feel empty. Outside, the wind eased. The storm quieted. Somewhere in the distance, the church bells of Everpine began to ring midnight. Ethan looked once more at the ribbon glinting pink against silver, and for the briefest moment, he believed maybe Christmas had knocked again. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the snow like crushed glass. The storm had passed, leaving Everpine wrapped in a hushed, radiant calm. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the air smelled of pine and baked bread. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole woke not to the echo of silence, but to the faint memory of laughter. It lingered in his house like warmth that refused to leave. The pink ribbon still hung on his tree, trembling gently whenever the heater came on. He poured himself coffee and stood in front of it again, unable to look away. He didn't understand why it mattered. It was a child's gesture, a meaningless thing. Yet somehow, that little bough had changed the entire room. When he finally stepped outside, the morning air hit his lungs sharp and clean. The town of Everpine stretched below, snowplows humming faintly in the distance. On impulse, something rare for him, he buttoned his coat and started walking toward Main Street. The snow crunched beneath his boots. He passed the post office, the hardware store, and finally, a small bakery tucked between two maple trees. Above its door hung a wooden sign, hand-painted in soft blue, "Clara's Hearth." Through the fogged window, he saw her, the woman from last night, her hair tied loosely, sleeves rolled, hands dusted with flour. Beside her on the counter, the little girl perched on a stool, waving a spatula like a wand. The sight hit him harder than he expected. He pushed open the door. A bell jingled softly. The scent of cinnamon butter and coffee wrapped around him like an embrace he hadn't realized he missed. Clara looked up in surprise, her eyes lighting for a brief second. "Mr. Cole," she said, smiling. "I didn't think CEOs were up this early on Christmas morning." He blinked. "You know who I am." "Everpine's not that big," she said. wiping her hands on her apron. Word travels fast. The man with the house by the lake, people talk. Mostly good things, I hope. She grinned. Mostly mysteries. Lily gasped when she noticed him. It's the castle man. She squealed. Ethan coughed into his fist, flustered. That's one way to put it. Clara laughed softly, a sound like wind through chimes. You'll have to forgive her. She has a thing for fairy tales. I can see that. He approached the counter. Rows of cookies, muffins, and tarts lined the glass case. You made all this morning? Habit, she said. When you've got a 5-year-old who wakes up at sunrise asking if Santa ate the cookies, you learn to start early. Lily tugged on his sleeve. He did eat them, right, Santa? Ethan crouched to her level. I think he must have stopped by your house first. You made him the good kind. She nodded seriously. Chocolate chip with extra butter. Mom says that's why our house smells like Christmas. He smiled before standing again. I'll take 2 of those then. And maybe whatever smells like heaven right now. Clara raised a brow. That'd be the pecan scones. I'll take one. He paused, lowering his voice. For scientific purposes. She handed him a paper bag and poured a coffee. Black. He hesitated. How did you know? You look like a black coffee kind of man, she said. Efficient. Precise. Probably checks your emails before breakfast. He huffed a laugh. You're not wrong. As he reached for his wallet, she waved a hand. Don't bother. Consider it a thank you for last night. He frowned. For what? For letting us in, she said simply. And for not minding Lily redecorating your tree. He looked down at his cup, then back up at her. She didn't redecorate it, he said quietly. She fixed it. Clara blinked, momentarily thrown off by the honesty in his tone. Something softened between them, small but undeniable. Lily, oblivious to the tension, began humming Jingle Bells while stirring imaginary cocoa in a paper cup. Ethan took a sip of his coffee. This place, he said, gesturing around, it feels like a heartbeat. That's the goal, Clara said. When I found this shop, it was abandoned. Broken windows, no insulation. Everyone said it wasn't worth saving. But I needed to start somewhere that smelled like hope again. He studied her face, the quiet strength behind her words. You did all this yourself? With a little help from YouTube and a stubborn streak, she said, smiling. Single mom economics. Ethan nodded, impressed. Well, you've created something beautiful. Thank you, she said softly. Coming from you, that means a lot. Their eyes held for a second too long. The air between them thickened with something neither could name. Clara broke it first, clearing her throat. So, Mr. Cole, do you bake? He shook his head. Not since college. I once set off a fire alarm making toast. She laughed again, this time freely. Then we'll start you with cookies next time. Next time? Unless you're too important for second visits. On the contrary, he said. I might make it a tradition. At that moment, Lily tugged his coat. Mr. Ethan, she said, eyes wide, if you come back tomorrow, can I show you my drawing? He crouched again. What did you draw? It's you, she said proudly, standing next to our snowman. But I gave you a smile, because you didn't have one yesterday. Ethan's throat tightened unexpectedly. Then I'll definitely come see it. Clara watched him, her expression unreadable but kind. When he left the bakery, the bell above the door chimed again, and the cold air hit his face like a reminder that the world outside was still the same. Except it wasn't. He walked home slowly, paper bag warm in his hands. The house on the hill looked different now, not smaller, not brighter, but somehow less empty inside. He placed the scone on a plate and set it next to the untouched dinner from the night before. He didn't eat it right away. He just stood there, looking at the 2 plates, and realized something strange. For the first time in 6 years, he wasn't waiting for someone who was gone. He was waiting for someone who might come back. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying laughter faintly from town. Ethan moved to the window, his breath clouding the glass. Down the hill, he could see the small bakery glowing against the dusk. Its sign lit like a lantern. He could almost smell the cinnamon from here. And then, without fully understanding why, he whispered, see you tomorrow. Clara, the pink ribbon on the tree fluttered in the warm draft. As if it had heard him, the next few days unfolded like snowflakes, quiet, fragile, and almost unreal. Every morning, Ethan Cole found himself doing something completely out of character, walking down the hill before sunrise, hands buried in his coat pockets, heading toward the little bakery that smelled like forgiveness. The bell above Clara's hearth jingled each time he entered, and each time he told himself he was just there for coffee. But by the third morning, he stopped pretending. Clara was always behind the counter, hair tied up in a messy bun, sleeves dusted with flour. The sight of her had become the warmest part of his day. Lily, meanwhile, had claimed the corner table by the window as her art studio. She drew constantly snowmen, reindeer, sometimes people. That morning, she waved a sheet of paper toward him as soon as he walked in. "Mr. Ethan, look." He took it carefully, trying not to smudge the colors. It was a drawing of his house, snow piled high round it, and right in front a tiny figure with brown hair and a pink bow, holding hands with a taller man in a scarf. "That's us," she said proudly. "I made you smile again." He looked at the picture for a long moment. "Do I really smile that much?" "Not yet," she said. "But you will." Behind the counter, Clara hid a smile behind the rim of her coffee cup. Ethan had always been good at reading people. Years of boardrooms, investors, and strategy meetings had taught him to spot weakness, bluff, and intent. But Clara Morgan was different. She didn't hide anything, not even her exhaustion. She moved with the kind of grace that came from stubbornness, not privilege. A woman who had learned how to build warmth out of almost nothing. One morning, he stayed longer than usual. The bakery had emptied after the breakfast rush, and snow had started falling again, thin, drifting flakes that glowed in the window light. Clara leaned on the counter, sipping her tea. "You must get lonely up there on the hill," she said gently. Ethan didn't answer right away. He was tracing the rim of his coffee cup, watching the steam rise and fade. "You get used to it," he said finally. "That doesn't mean it's good for you." He looked up, surprised by her honesty. She shrugged. "Some silences heal you. Others eat you alive." He couldn't help but smile at that. "You should put that on your sign. Clara's hearth, free cookies, and unsolicited therapy." She laughed, the sound quick and bright. "I'll charge double for the therapy." The snow outside thickened. They watched it together through the glass, neither rushing to end the moment. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why Everpine? You could live anywhere: Vancouver, Toronto, New York even. Why here?" He hesitated, unsure how to explain something that had no logic. "My wife loved this town," he said quietly. "We used to come here in the winters." She said it felt like the world stopped rushing. Clara's voice softened. "I'm sorry." He nodded, eyes still on the snow. She was 6 months pregnant when the car went off the road. It was a whiteout that night. "I never even made it to the hospital." The words fell between them like glass. Clara said nothing, just reached across the counter, resting her flour-dusted hand over his. He didn't pull away. "I know what it's like," she said. "Different story, same hole in the heart." Ethan looked up, and she smiled faintly. "Lily's father left when I told him I was pregnant. Said he wasn't ready to be a dad. Guess some people never are." He wanted to say something comforting, but everything sounded inadequate. So instead, he said the truth. He was wrong. She blinked. "About what?" "About you ruining your life," he said. "You made something beautiful out of it." For a second, Clara just stared at him, caught off guard. Then she exhaled, slow and trembling, like she'd been holding her breath for years. "Thank you." The words were simple, but they filled the room more than the smell of cinnamon ever could. By the time Ethan left, the streets were blanketed in fresh snow. He walked home slower this time, noticing small things he'd ignored for years. The laughter spilling from the cafe across the street, the smell of pine needles from a wreath on a door, the faint hum of a radio playing old carols through an open window. That night, when he reached his house, it no longer felt like a monument to what he'd lost. It felt like something waiting to be lived in. He lit the fireplace, something he hadn't done since the accident, and watched the flames flicker against the glass. The pink ribbon on the tree glowed in the light, the single imperfection in a perfect room. He didn't fix it. He couldn't. It had become a reminder that not everything broken needed to be replaced. He poured 2 cups of cocoa out of habit and paused, realizing what he'd done. For the first time, he didn't feel foolish about it. He set one mug across from him at the table and raised his own. To new neighbors, he murmured that the heat from the mug rose in soft swirls. He imagined the laughter from the bakery, Lily's voice calling him Castle Man, Clara's quiet strength. Then, faintly, just faintly, he heard something outside. A giggle, then another. He went to the window. Down on the street, under the lamppost, Clara and Lily were walking home, bundled together under one oversized umbrella. The light painted a halo round them, and their shadows stretched long across the snow. Lily was holding a paper bag, swinging it back and forth. Clara looked up toward the hill, and even from that distance, he could swear she saw him. She raised her hand in a small wave. Ethan pressed his hand lightly against the glass. He didn't wave back, not yet, but his heart did. Later that night, he couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet again, but now it was a different kind of quiet, expectant, alive, like breath before a word. He found himself standing before the tree once more, staring at the pink ribbon dot. In that moment, he made a small promise to himself. Tomorrow, he wouldn't just watch from the window. He'd walk down there. He'd help bake the cookies. He'd learn to laugh again. For the first time in 6 winters, Ethan Cole didn't dread Christmas morning. He was waiting for it. And somewhere, beneath the soft hum of the heater and the ticking clock, the faintest sound of a child's giggle seemed to linger, like the echo of something that had finally begun to return. Hope. It began with cocoa. Not the drink itself, but what it stood for, the quiet ritual that had started binding them together without any of them realizing it. Every afternoon, after the bakery closed and the streets of Everpine began to blur under dusk, Clara and Lily would walk up the hill toward Ethan's house. It had become a habit so natural that even the snowplow drivers would wave when they saw the pair trudging up with a basket in hand. Inside that basket, warm cookies, sometimes cinnamon rolls, and always a small packet of cocoa powder that Lily insisted was magic dust, because it fixes sad faces, she explained. Ethan had smiled the first time she said it, but deep down he wondered if maybe she was right. That evening, the fire crackled softly in the living room while snow swept against the tall windows. Ethan poured cocoa into 3 mismatched mugs, careful to set the smallest one on a napkin so Lily wouldn't burn her hands. She climbed onto the armchair beside the tree, humming something that sounded halfway between a carol and a secret. Clara watched her, smiling. I swear she was born singing. She's got good timing, Ethan said, handing her a mug. Most people sing when they're happy. She sings to make herself happy. Clara tilted her head. That's kind of beautiful. He shrugged, settling into the chair across from her. I think that's what strong people do. They don't wait for the storm to stop, they sing through it. For a moment, she didn't answer. The glow of the fire painted gold across her face, softening the weariness that usually hid behind her eyes. Then she said quietly, I used to sing, too, when Lily was still a baby. Just me and her, in a tiny apartment in Toronto with paper-thin walls and a heater that barely worked. I'd sing to drown out the noise outside, and sometimes the noise in my head. Ethan looked up. What song? She laughed softly. Anything, lullabies, old carols, even jingles from commercials. He smiled. That's dedication, Clara shrugged, stirring her cocoa. Desperation's the twin sister of dedication, Mr. Cole. He chuckled. You're full of poetry tonight. Maybe it's the cocoa, or the company. Their eyes met for just a second longer than they should have. Lily, meanwhile, had climbed off the armchair and was now standing in front of the Christmas tree, examining the silver ornaments. Mr. Ethan, she said suddenly, why don't you have any presents under your tree? Ethan blinked. Well, I guess I didn't get around to it, she frowned. But how will Santa know where to put yours? Clara smiled into her mug. You're in trouble now. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, pretending to think. Maybe Santa knows I already got the best present last week. Lily perked up. What is it? He pointed at the small pink ribbon still hanging from one of the branches. That, the little girl's face lit up, bright as the star on the tree. That's cheating, Clara said playfully. She'll be impossible to live with now. Good, Ethan said, grinning. The world needs more impossible people. Later. after Lily fell asleep on the couch with a half-eaten cookie in her hand. The two adults sat quietly by the fire. The house was filled with the kind of silence that didn't sting anymore, it breathed. Clara sipped her cocoa slowly. "You've changed, you know." He raised an eyebrow. "Since when?" "Since the night we knocked on your door. You used to look like someone holding his breath. Now you look like you finally remembered how to exhale." He smiled faintly. "You noticed that, huh?" She set her mug down. "You hide it well, but grief has a weight. It shows in the shoulders first." He looked at her across the table, the light flickering between them. "How did you learn that?" "Because mine used to hurt, too." He nodded slowly, then leaned back. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course, when my wife died," he began, voice steady but low, "I stopped tasting things. Food, wine, even coffee, it all turned into cardboard. I didn't even notice at first. But tonight, I tasted this cocoa. Actually tasted it." Clara's lips parted, a whisper of breath escaping. "Ethan." He shook his head lightly. "I don't mean it to sound dramatic. It's just strange how something so simple can remind you you're still alive." Clara's eyes softened. "It's not strange. It's healing." They sat in silence again, the fire popping gently. "After a while," she said. "Can I ask what her name was?" "Maya." He stared into the flames. "She used to talk to the snow like it was alive. Said it listened better than people. She sounds lovely." She was. His voice cracked just slightly. Clara reached over and touched his hand lightly, not to comfort, but to acknowledge. For a long while, they didn't speak. Outside, the snow pressed against the windows in thick sheets. The warmth of the cocoa cooled, but neither of them moved to finish it. When Lily stirred, mumbling something in her sleep, Clara stood and gently pulled a blanket over her. Ethan watched her, the way she moved with tenderness that seemed effortless. As she tucked her daughter in, she whispered something too soft for him to hear. But whatever it was, it made the room feel safe. When she turned back, she caught him watching. "What?" she asked, smiling. He shook his head. "Just thinking how different this house feels with you to hear." Clara looked around. The soft glow of the tree, the gentle hum of the fire, the pink bough trembling in the warm air. "It feels like a home," she said. He nodded. "It hasn't, for a very long time." She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Ethan, I want to tell you something. Something I don't usually say out loud." He leaned forward. "Okay, when I left Toronto, I promised myself I wouldn't let anyone in again, not like that. I thought it was safer to build walls than risk losing everything twice." He waited. "But then, Lily knocked on your door, and somehow you opened it for both of us." She smiled faintly. "Now I'm starting to wonder if maybe I was the one who needed saving." Ethan's throat tightened. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "We both did." The fire crackled softly. Snow tapped against the windows like fingertips. Somewhere between the warmth of the room and the sound of the storm, something shifted, something fragile and new. Not love yet, but something that knew how to find its way there. When Clara and Lily left later that night, Ethan walked them to the door. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the world silver and still. He stood there long after they disappeared down the hill, their laughter fading into the night. Inside, he looked at the half-empty mugs of cocoa on the table and realized the secret wasn't in the drink at all. It was in the people who stayed long enough to share. The first sign of trouble arrived in a plain white envelope. It was late afternoon when Clara found it wedged between her bakery's door and the snowdrift. She thought it was another Christmas card from a customer until she opened it. The letterhead read Reeves and Associates, Family Law, Toronto. Her breath caught. No, it couldn't be. Inside, a few short lines ended 5 quiet years of peace. Mr. Daniel Reeves has filed for partial custody of his biological daughter, Lily Morgan. The case will be heard in the Provincial Court of British Columbia. The words blurred. The air in the room seemed to thin. For a long time, Clara just stood there, the letter trembling in her hands while the smell of cooling bread filled the air. She barely noticed the bell above the bakery door ring. "Clara?" Ethan's voice. Calm, steady, always steady. He'd started dropping by after closing, helping her lock up or sweep the floor, though neither of them admitted they didn't want to leave. Now, one look at her face told him something was wrong. He crossed the room quickly. What happened? She couldn't find her voice, so she just handed him the letter. As he read, his jaw tightened. By the time he finished, the quiet warmth in his eyes had hardened into something sharper. He wants custody? Ethan asked slowly. Clara nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. He disappeared the moment I told him I was pregnant. No calls, no support, nothing. And now, 5 years later, he decides to play father because he has a job and a lawyer. Ethan's voice was low. Do you have representation? She shook her head. I can't afford one good enough to fight him. He's got money now, connections. He could make me look like the unstable one small-town baker, single mom, no degree. Ethan folded the letter carefully, his mind already moving faster than his pulse. You won't lose her, he said. She looked up, eyes wide and wet. You can't promise that. Watch me, he said quietly. That night, Ethan stayed long after Lily had gone to bed upstairs in the small apartment above the bakery. Clara sat at the counter, clutching a mug of tea that had long gone cold. You shouldn't get involved, she said finally. This isn't your fight. He leaned forward, elbows on the counter. Then whose is it? You've carried everything alone for years. Let someone help. She shook her head. I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Clara, you never asked me for anything. I'm offering because I care. Because you and Lily deserve someone who stays. The word stays hit her harder than she expected. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind rattled softly against the window pane. Ethan. She whispered, Why are you doing this? He met her gaze. Because someone should have done it for me. By the next morning, he'd already made a call. A discreet one to a friend who owed him favors from his corporate years. By noon, one of the most respected family lawyers in Vancouver had agreed to take Clara's case. Expenses handled by an anonymous benefactor. Clara protested, of course. Ethan ignored her. Within days, paperwork was filed, testimonies gathered, and the town of Everpine buzzed with quiet rumors. Most people had never seen Ethan Cole in a courtroom or anywhere public, but when the day came, he was there. The courthouse sat in a neighboring town, small and wood-paneled, smelling faintly of pine cleaner and paper. Clara sat beside her lawyer, hands clasped tight in her lap. Across the aisle sat Daniel Reeves, tall, polished, wearing a suit too new to be trusted. When he looked at her, there was no remorse, only calculation. Ethan sat behind Clara in the second row. His presence was silent but anchoring. Like gravity itself, the judge entered, gavel struck, and the proceedings began. Daniel's lawyer spoke first, smooth, rehearsed lines about reconnecting, responsibility, and the child's right to know her father. He painted Daniel as a changed man, reformed, successful, ready to be a positive influence. Clara's stomach turned. Then came her turn. Her lawyer defended her stability, her dedication, her spotless record. But when Daniel's attorney started poking holes, asking about finances, her single status, her emotional dependency on town acquaintances, Ethan stood. The courtroom fell silent. I'd like to speak, he said calmly. The judge hesitated. Are you a relative, Mr. Cole? Ethan Cole. He straightened his suit jacket. I'm not family, but I am a witness. Permission granted. He walked to the stand, every step measured. When he spoke, his voice carried the calm authority of a man used to leading entire boardrooms. I have known Ms. Clara Morgan and her daughter for several months, he began. In that time, I've seen a woman raise her child with more patience, kindness, and courage than most households with two parents combined. Lily is not just cared for, she is loved, deeply. She is safe, and that safety exists because of her mother. He paused, glancing toward Clara. She looked down, blinking back tears. Daniel's lawyer rose, smirking. Mr. Cole, your relationship with Ms. Morgan, would you say it's romantic? Ethan didn't flinch. It's human, he said. We're two people who understand loss and try to make something good from it. If your question implies impropriety, the answer is no. But if it implies loyalty, then yes, I'm guilty. A faint murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge raised an eyebrow. And what is your interest in this case, Mr. Cole? Ethan looked directly at Daniel. His tone softened, but his eyes didn't. My interest, he said, is making sure that little girl never learns what it feels like to be left waiting for someone who never comes back. The room went utterly still. Even Daniel looked away when the session ended. The judge didn't give a verdict right away. Custody cases never moved fast. But as everyone filed out, Clara turned to Ethan, tears spilling freely now. "You didn't have to do that," she said, voice trembling. "I know. Why did you?" He looked at her, then really looked and said, "Because I meant every word." Outside, snow had begun to fall again, swirling through the courthouse steps. Lily was waiting with a family friend, clutching a snow globe Ethan had given her that morning. When she saw them, she ran forward and threw her arms around both. "Did we win?" she asked. Ethan crouched to meet her eyes. "We're still waiting, kiddo," she frowned. "Then we'll wait together," she said firmly. Clara laughed through her tears. Ethan smiled, the first real smile in weeks. As they walked toward the car, snowflakes landing softly in their hair, Clara slipped her hand into his. Not for balance, not for comfort, just because it felt right. And for the first time in a long, long time, Ethan Cole didn't feel like he was fighting the storm alone. Winter settled deep over Everpine that year, wrapping the town in a hush that made even the air feel softer. Ice crystals clung to the edges of windows, and every night the sky spilled snow like powdered sugar over rooftops and for trees. Up on the hill, Ethan Cole's once empty house glowed with golden light. Laughter echoed faintly through its walls, laughter that had not been heard there for 6 long years. It had been 3 months since the custody hearing. The verdict finally arrived in early February, full guardianship awarded to Clara Morgan. Daniel Reeves had withdrawn his claim, the official reason cited as mutual agreement, but those who were there that day knew the truth. He had seen something in court, a man who didn't have to be blood to stand like family, a man who would not walk away. After that, he never came back to Everpine. On a quiet evening not long after, Clara and Lily stood in Ethan's kitchen, surrounded by the smell of cinnamon and melted butter. Lily's cheeks were dusted with flour, her hands sticky with dough. "I told you to use the rolling pin, not your elbows," Clara teased. Lily giggled. "But it makes the dough faster." Ethan appeared from behind the counter, grinning. "I think we've invented the world's first elbow cookies. Don't laugh, Mr. Ethan." Lily pointed at him, mock stern. "You have to eat the first one." He held up his hands in surrender. "As the bravest man in British Columbia, I accept my fate." Clara shook her head, trying not to smile. The sight of them together, Lily bossing him around like a tiny general, Ethan pretending to obey, filled her chest with a warmth that no fireplace could match. When they finished baking, Lily arranged the cookies on a plate shaped like a snowflake. "Now it's perfect," she declared. Ethan crouched down beside her. "You know what else is perfect?" "What?" "This house. It finally sounds alive again." Lily grinned. "Because we live here now." Clara froze mid-step. "Lily," but Ethan just smiled gently. "It's okay," he said. "She's right." In truth, Clara and Lily hadn't officially moved in, not yet. They still kept the small apartment above the bakery, though more nights than not. They ended up staying here. One evening it was because of a snowstorm, another because the oven had broken. But lately, it was simply because the house on the hill felt more like home than anywhere else. Clara tried to ignore what that meant, but the truth kept slipping through in small ways. A toothbrush by the sink, a child's coat hanging beside his in the foyer, her favorite mug sitting beside his in the cupboard. Sometimes, while folding laundry or stirring cocoa, she would look up and see Ethan reading by the fire, Lily asleep on his lap, and realize she didn't want to imagine her life any other way. That night, the three of them sat by the fireplace, the snow whispering softly outside. Lily had dozed off again, curled beneath a Whereupon blanket. Clara sat on the couch, watching the flames dance in his eyes. "Do you ever think," she said quietly, "that maybe all of this happened for a reason?" Ethan looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if I hadn't left Toronto, if Lily hadn't insisted on knocking on your door that night, if you hadn't answered." She smiled faintly. "It feels like we were all running from something, and somehow ended up in the same place." He considered that for a moment, then nodded. "Maybe some doors were meant to open." She looked down, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "Do you ever miss her? Your wife, I mean, every day," he said. "But it doesn't hurt the same way anymore." Clara hesitated. "Because of us." He met her eyes, steady and kind. "Because of life," he said softly. "Because I finally stopped standing in the same room where everything ended and started standing in the one where things could begin again." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full like a heartbeat between them. He leaned forward slightly, close enough for her to smell the faint trace of cedar and coffee on his shirt. But before he could speak, Lily stirred, mumbling in her sleep. Clara smiled, breaking the tension. "She's the best chaperone in the world," Ethan chuckled quietly. "Always shows up right on time." The days grew longer. Snow melted from the rooftops, trickling down gutters in silver streams. By March, the lake below their hill had begun to thaw, and Everpine smelled faintly of pine sap and wet earth. Ethan's home changed with the seasons, too. The sterile whites and silvers were replaced with color-soft blues, warm woods, paper snowflakes made by Lily that still clung to the windows even in spring. And though no one ever said it aloud, they were a family now, every morning. Clara drove Lily to school while Ethan made coffee and packed their lunches. Every afternoon, Lily would burst into his office shouting, "Dad G, look what I made." And the name stuck. Dad G. At first, he'd laughed. "That sounds like a rapper, not a father." But she only giggled and said, "You're both." Soon everyone in town knew him by that name. Dad G, the CEO who could fix a broken snowman faster than a server outage. One Sunday, they decided to decorate the living room for Easter. Lily cut out paper bunnies while Clara painted old mason jars into pastel candle holders. Ethan set up the ladder to hang new string lights above the window. "You know," he said, squinting, "I used to think houses like this were supposed to stay perfect. Now I'm starting to like the mess." Clara looked up from the table, smiling. "That's because it's not a mess. It's proof someone lives here." He paused, staring down at her. The light from the window hit her face just right, soft, honest, real. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. "Clara," he began. But before he could say more, Lily squealed, "Dad G, the bunny's missing an ear." He laughed, shaking his head. "Crisis averted. I'm on it." But later, when the house grew quiet and Lily was asleep upstairs, Clara found him by the window again. Only this time, he wasn't staring out in loneliness. He was smiling. She walked up beside him. "You're thinking about something." He looked at her, eyes warm. "About how long it's been since this place felt like a home." She nodded softly. "It feels like that for us too." Ethan turned fully toward her, his voice low. "Then maybe it's time to stop pretending it's temporary." Clara froze. "You mean?" He reached for her hand. "I mean, this is your home. Both of you. If you'll have me, I'd like it to stay that way. For a heartbeat." The world outside disappeared, the snow melt, the wind, even the faint ticking of the clock. Then Clara whispered, "We already do." That night, when the last lights in town went out, the house on the hill stayed glowing long after. Inside, 3 cups of cocoa sat on the table, one for each of them. The pink ribbons still fluttered from the tree in the corner, though Christmas had long passed. It had become something more than decoration now. It was a promise, a reminder that one knock on a door could change a lifetime. By the time the next winter rolled around, Everpine had turned into a snow globe again. The lake froze in perfect stillness, wreaths hung from every porch, and the air smelled like pine needles and bread. For most people, it was another Christmas. For Ethan Cole, it was the first one that truly felt like home. Inside the house on the hill, light spilled from every window. The fire burned bright, and laughter echoed off the walls. Clara was in the kitchen, humming as she dusted powdered sugar over a tray of shortbread. Lily sat cross-legged on the living room floor, building a tower out of cookie cutters, singing her own Christmas carol at the top of her lungs. Ethan stood near the tree, pretending to check the lights while secretly watching them. The tree brushed the ceiling this year, twice as tall as the one that used to stand lonely in the corner. It was covered in hand-cut stars, candy canes, and paper ornaments Lily had made at school. Near the top, tied to a sturdy branch, fluttered the small pink ribbon that had started it all. "Dad G," Lily called suddenly. "You forgot the star." He turned with mock surprise. The star. I thought the decorator-in-chief handled that. Lily crossed her arms. You're taller. You have to do the important part. He grinned. Yes, ma'am. Lifting her gently, he placed her on his shoulders. She giggled, clutching the glittering star as she balanced. Okay, now left no. Right wait. No, more left. Clara leaned against the doorway, watching them, warmth glowing in her chest. There had been a time when this room had felt like a stranger's museum. Cold, colorless, untouchable. Now it was covered in flower, laughter, and life. Perfect, Lily declared. Pressing the star into place, Ethan steadied her as she stretched. When she was done, she patted his head proudly. We did it. He looked up at her and smiled. Yeah, kiddo, we really did. Later that evening, the snow began to fall again soft and thick. Just like that night 1 year ago when everything had changed. They sat together on the couch, hot cocoa steaming in their mugs. Lily was half asleep between them, a cookie still in her hand. She's growing so fast, Ethan said quietly. Clara nodded. Sometimes I wish I could slow it all down. Just stay in this moment a little longer. He looked at her, eyes soft. We will. There's no rush anymore. She smiled faintly. You always sound so sure. He shrugged. I used to be certain about the wrong things: success, money, control. Now I'm certain about the right ones. You, her, us. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. You know, she whispered, a year ago tonight, you were alone. He smiled, tracing a finger along the edge of his mug. And then came 3 knocks. She laughed softly. 3 little miracles. They sat in silence, the fire popping gently beside them, the snow piling on the windowsill. Outside, the world was still. Inside, it pulsed with warmth. At nearly midnight, Lily stirred and mumbled, cookies. Ethan chuckled. Even in her sleep, Clara stood, stretching. I'll tuck her in. He followed her up the stairs, watching as she brushed snowflake-shaped crumbs off the child's blanket and kissed her forehead. Good night, sweet girl. When they returned to the living room, the house was quiet again. Clara went to the window, looking out at the snow. Do you ever wonder, she said softly, what would have happened if I hadn't knocked? Ethan joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. Then I guess I'd still be staring out that same window, waiting for something I couldn't name. She smiled, turning to face him. And now, he met her gaze. Now I know what it's called. What? Home? Clara's eyes glistened. She reached up and touched his cheek, the way you do when words aren't enough. You saved us, Ethan. He shook his head, smiling. No, you and Lily, you saved me. For a moment, time stopped. Then she leaned in, and the distance between them finally disappeared. The kiss was soft, unhurried, like something that had been waiting its whole life to arrive. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, two hearts finally exhaled. The next morning, sunlight glittered off the snow like diamonds. Lily burst into their room at dawn, shouting, "It's Christmas Day." Ethan groaned, sitting up. Already? Yes. You said we could give cookies to the new neighbors. He rubbed his eyes, smiling. Did I? Clara laughed from the doorway. You did. Several times. 10 minutes later, they were bundled up in scarves and coats, Lily holding a tray of freshly baked cookies tied with a red ribbon. She bounced excitedly as they reached the door. Ethan opened it, letting in the crisp morning air. The whole town lay silent under the snow, every rooftop glinting gold in the early light. Okay, he said. Who's ready? Me, Lily shouted, raising the tray like a trophy. Clara smiled. All right, kiddo. What do we do first? Lily grinned mischievously. We knock. She turned toward the open door and, giggling, tapped her tiny knuckles 3 times on the wood. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed softly through the hall, the same way it had 1 year ago, but this time, it wasn't a plea for warmth. It was an invitation. Ethan laughed. You're knocking on our own door. I know, Lily said proudly. Now someone new can find us, just like we found you. Across the street, a moving truck sat parked in front of the small cottage on the corner. A young couple stepped out, carrying boxes, their cheeks flushed red from the cold. Lily gasped, See, I told you. Without waiting, she marched across the snowy path, tray in hand. Clara and Ethan followed, smiling as she called out, Merry Christmas. Cookies for the new neighbors. The couple looked up, surprised, then smiled back. And just like that, the story repeated itself, not in sadness, but in light. Later, as dusk settled again over Everpine, the three of them stood under the porch light, arms around each other. The snow fell softly round them, catching in Clara's hair and on Lily's lashes. Somewhere down the hill, church bells began to chime 12 times midnight. Ethan looked at them, his family, his home, his miracle. I used to think, he said quietly, that peace was something you earned after enough pain. But it's not. It's something you open your door to. Clara smiled through the shimmer of snow. And what does it feel like? He looked down at her hand in his, at Lily leaning sleepily against his coat. Then he glanced toward the open door behind them, the firelight glowing from within. It feels, he said softly, a lot like this. For a long moment, they just stood there, letting the snow fall. The world silent except for the faint heartbeat of life and love. Then Lily's small voice broke the stillness. Dad G? Yes, kiddo. Next year, she murmured, yawning. Can I knock again? He chuckled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Every year, sweetheart. Every year. Inside, the fire crackled, and the pink ribbon on the tree shimmered in the glow. Outside, the snow whispered across the hills, carrying with it the quiet promise that some stories don't end, they circle back, finding new doors to open. And somewhere between the warmth of the hearth and the hush of falling snow, three hearts beat in rhythm, steady and certain. The house on the hill was no longer a place of waiting. It was a place of welcome. The door stayed open forever.